It was a bright but busy morning in the city. Cars honked, people rushed, and the streets were full of noise. In the middle of it all sat a sleek black car, expensive, shiny, and clearly belonging to someone important. Inside the car was Alexander Reed, a billionaire known for his sharp business skills and cold heart. He owned companies in different parts of the world and was always dressed in expensive suits. People feared him in boardrooms. They called him a genius, but also a man without feelings. Today, however, something unexpected happened. His car broke. Down on the edge of the city, far from the tall glass buildings and luxury restaurants he was used to. His driver stepped out and tried to fix the issue, but nothing worked. Alexander looked outside the tinted windows. He was in a part of the city he had never cared to visit. The buildings were small, paint peeling from the walls, and people looked tired. But there was something peaceful about it, too. As he sat waiting impatiently, he noticed a small, old building across the street. A colorful sign above it read, Hope Community Center. Children were going in and out, laughing and playing. He had never seen a place like that up close. Usually, he only saw such neighborhoods from helicopters or car windows. Out of boredom, and maybe curiosity, Alexander stepped out of the car. He told his driver, "I'll be back," and crossed the street. He wasn't sure why he was walking into a building that had nothing to do with money or power. Maybe he just wanted a break from the silence of his car. The moment he walked in, he felt something different. The air was filled with the sound of laughter and chatter. The walls were painted with drawings of sunflowers, rainbows, and smiling faces. There were shelves filled with old books and worn-out toys, but the children didn't seem to mind. They were happy. A few looked at him curiously. He clearly didn't belong there, dressed in a suit that cost more than the centers. Yearly budget. He started walking slowly, looking around. That's when he saw her, a girl in a wheelchair, sitting near a window, holding a sketchbook. She couldn't have been more than 15. Her clothes were simple, and her legs were covered with a soft blanket. Her hair was tied in a loose ponytail, and she wore a small smile as she focused on her drawing. Without realizing, Alexander stood there staring at her. There was something about the girl that caught his attention. Maybe it was the peace on her face. Maybe it was the way she seemed so focused and happy, despite being surrounded by so little. She looked up and saw him. "Hi," she said kindly, her voice soft but clear. Alexander nodded, slightly awkward. "Hi," he replied. "You're not from around here," she added with a playful tone. "No, I'm not," he admitted. "My car broke down." The girl laughed gently. "Well, maybe it was meant to happen. Sometimes breakdowns take us to the right places." Her words surprised him. Most people talked to him with fear or fake respect. But this girl spoke like they were equals. She didn't ask for money, didn't praise his name, didn't even seem to recognize him. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lila," she answered, closing her sketchbook. "And you?" "Alexander," he replied, leaving out the last name. "Nice to meet you, Alexander. Want to sit?" He looked around. There were a few chairs near her. Slowly, he walked over and sat down. "What were you drawing?" he asked. Lila smiled, opened her book. She showed him a drawing of children playing under a tree, with a girl in a wheelchair joining them. "That's beautiful," he said honestly. "Thanks. I like to draw moments I want to see happen. Maybe if I draw them enough, they'll become real." Alexander nodded slowly. "Do you come here every day?" "Every day I can," she replied. "I live nearby with my aunt. The center gives me a reason to get out of bed. It gives me hope." Something about the way she said it touched him, though he didn't show it on his face. He asked, "What happened to your legs?" She paused for a moment. "I was born with a condition. Doctors said I wouldn't walk." Some days I feel fine, other days, not so much. But I still get to smile. That's a win. Alexander looked at her carefully. She was so calm, so full of life. Here she was, in a wheelchair, with no money, no luxury, and yet she smiled more than anyone he knew. He had everything, and yet most nights he felt empty. Lila seemed to have nothing, but her eyes were full of light. A small boy ran over to her and gave her a flower made of paper. "For you, Lila," he said cheerfully. "Thank you, Max." "It's perfect," she replied, holding it close like a treasure. Alexander watched in silence. He was in a world he didn't understand, a world where joy was found in paper flowers and hand-drawn dreams. "Do you like it here?" he asked. "I love it," she said quickly. "People care here. We don't have much, but we have each other." He nodded. "And what do you want to be when you grow up?" Lila looked out the window and thought for a moment. "I want to be someone who makes people smile. Maybe an artist or a teacher. Something that helps." Alexander felt a strange tightness in his chest. He hadn't felt something like that in years. Maybe it was emotion. Maybe it was shame. "Why do you smile so much?" he finally asked, not knowing why he cared so much about the answer. She looked at him and smiled again. But this time, it was a softer, sadder smile. "Because I don't know how many days I have. But I know I don't want to waste them being sad. If I can make someone else's day better, even a little, then it was a good day." That was the moment it hit him. Her words were simple, but they carried a truth he had forgotten long ago. Tears filled his eyes, but he quickly looked away. "I need to go," he said, standing up. "Okay," she replied kindly. "Thanks for talking to me." He turned to leave, but stopped. "Lila? Yes? I'll see you again." She nodded. "I hope so." As he walked back to his car, his heart felt heavier than his briefcase. For years he had been chasing money, success, and power. But none of that had made him feel the way Lila's words had in just a few minutes. He sat in his car, silent. For the first time in years, he felt something break inside a wall, a barrier, something cold and hard. And quietly, without a sound, Alexander Reed cried. The driver glanced at him through the rearview mirror, surprised, but said nothing. Something had started to change, and it all began with a broken car and a girl who smiled. Alexander didn't sleep well that night. He lay in his soft, warm bed in his large penthouse, looking out at the glowing city lights. Usually, this view made him feel powerful, but tonight it made him feel small. His mind kept going back to the little girl in the wheelchair, the way she smiled, the peaceful way she talked, the sparkle in her eyes, and the sentence that wouldn't leave his head. "I don't know how many days I have, but I know I don't want to waste them being sad." He had heard many speeches in his life, motivational speakers, business leaders, famous people with big titles. But not one of them had touched him the way Lila's simple words had. The next morning, Alexander's routine felt strange. He went through his usual steps: coffee, newspaper, phone calls, but everything felt distant. The people who greeted him in his office spoke in cheerful tones, but he could feel the emptiness in their voices. It was the same emptiness he had lived in for years. Around noon, he made a decision. He canceled all his meetings for the day. "Are you feeling all right, sir?" his assistant asked, shocked. He never missed meetings. "I'm fine," he said. "Just going somewhere." Without telling anyone where he was going, Alexander got into his car and told the driver to take him back to the neighborhood where the community center was. The driver looked surprised, but said nothing. They drove through the busy city, leaving behind the tall buildings, the busy offices, and the world Alexander had ruled for so long. Soon they reached the edge of the city. The air felt different, more real. The same broken roads, the same small shops, the same old building with the colorful sign, Hope Community Center. Alexander stepped out of the car and walked in. Inside, the place looked just as he remembered. Laughter, noise, children running, painted walls full of bright drawings. It felt alive. He looked around for Lila. She wasn't near the window this time. A woman noticed him and walked over. "Hello, can I help you?" she asked kindly. Her name tag read Miss Clara. "I'm looking for Lila," he said. The woman's face softened. "She's in the art room today. Down the hall, second door. To the left." He nodded. "Thank you." As he walked down the hallway, he heard music playing softly from one of the rooms. Children were singing. He passed rooms with kids learning to read, painting on large paper rolls. Even one room where 2 teenagers were putting on a small puppet show. Finally, he reached the art room. Inside, there were several kids sitting at tables, painting and drawing. And there, by the far wall, was Lila still in her wheelchair, still holding a sketchbook. Her face lit up the moment she saw him. "You came back," she said, smiling. "I said I would," Alexander replied, walking over and pulling up a chair beside her. "I didn't think someone like you would remember me," she said honestly. "Why?" "Not? You look like someone who forgets places like this." Alexander paused. "Maybe I used to be." They sat in silence for a moment. Lila was working on a new drawing. This one showed a large tree with many people standing under it. Some of them were in wheelchairs. Some were not. They were all holding hands. "What's this one about?" he asked. "It's about kindness," she said. "It's about people standing together, no matter what. I like to imagine a world like that." Alexander looked closely at the picture. He noticed that one of the people under the tree looked a lot like Lila, and standing beside her was someone in a suit with a kind expression. "Is that me?" he asked. Lila giggled. "Maybe." He smiled, something he rarely did. They talked for a while. Layla told him more about her life, how her parents had passed away when she was younger, how her aunt took care of her now, how the community center had become her second home. She told him how she loved to draw, because it helped her forget. "A pain in her legs. Does it hurt a lot?" he asked gently. "Sometimes," she said. "A pain is part of life. Joy is something you choose." Again, her words struck something deep inside him. Alexander told her a little about himself, too, not the billionaire part, but how he grew up in a small apartment, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs. How he had once dreamed of being a writer, but money had become his main focus. "You wanted to write?" Lila's eyes widened. He nodded. "A long time ago. I even wrote poems as a boy." "Do you still have them?" "No," he said. "I threw them away when I started chasing money." "That's sad," she said softly. "Those poems were probably the real you." He looked at her, surprised by how true her words felt. How had this young girl in a wheelchair managed to understand him more than anyone else ever had? "I think you should write again," she added. "Even just one line." He smiled. "Maybe I will, but only if you keep drawing." She raised her pinky finger. "Pinky promise?" He laughed and locked pinkies with her. More children joined their table. Some were shy, but Lila introduced Alexander like he was one of them. "This is my friend Alexander. He likes drawings and poetry." They giggled at the idea of a man in a suit liking poetry. But soon they were all showing him their art, asking questions and laughing together. He stayed longer than he had planned. Hours passed, but he didn't look at his phone. Once, when it was time to leave, Lila handed him a folded paper. "Open it later," she said. "All right," he nodded. "Thank you. Will you come again?" He looked at her. "Yes, I will." That night, back in his penthouse, Alexander opened the paper. Inside was a sketch him and Lila sitting under a tree, both smiling. Under it, she had written one line in big, uneven letters. You don't need to be perfect to be good. And again, tears came to his eyes that in all the years he had built his empire, he had never felt this way. He had never felt so seen, so human, so full of something real. He folded the sketch gently and placed it on his desk. Not in a drawer, not hidden. Right on top, where he could see it every morning. Something was changing inside Alexander Reed. It had started with a single conversation, and a girl who still believed in kindness. Alexander woke up earlier than usual. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like checking his emails or stock reports the moment he opened his eyes. Instead, he reached for the small paper drawing Lila had given him. He looked at it for a long time, running his fingers over the lines she wrote. You don't need to be perfect to be good. Those words echoed in his heart again and again. That morning, instead of going to the office, he asked his driver to take him somewhere else, his childhood neighborhood. It had been decades since he last visited. The streets were narrower than he remembered, and the buildings smaller. Many had changed, but the memories remained. He stood outside the tiny apartment building where he used to live with his mother. She worked so hard to give him a better life. She used to say, kindness is a gift you can give every day. Somewhere along the way, he had forgotten that lesson. Lila's words had brought it back. On the way back to the city, Alexander made a decision. He wanted to know more about Lila, not just what she had told him, but everything. He wanted to help her, but he wanted to do it the right way, not just by throwing money at the problem. He called his private investigator, a kind older man named Mr. Harris, and asked him to quietly find out about Lila's life, her health, her living situation, her future. A few days later, Mr. Harris came to his office with a folder. Alexander opened it slowly, unsure of what he might find. Her name is Lila Martin, Mr. Harris began. She's 15 years old. She lives with her aunt, who works 2 jobs to support them. Her condition is called spinal muscular atrophy. It's a rare disease that makes her muscles weaker over time. Alexander listened carefully. Doctors told her family that she might not live past her teenage years. But she's stronger than anyone expected. Still, without proper care, her condition could get worse. Is there treatment? Alexander asked. Mr. Harris nodded. There's a new kind of therapy. It's expensive and hard to get, but there's hope. With the right care, she could live a long and healthy life. Maybe even walk someday. Alexander felt his chest tighten. All this time, Lila had been smiling, helping others, making drawings full of hope while carrying this heavy truth. She never complained. She never asked for help. What about the community center? He asked. They're running low on funds. They rely on small donations. The people there care a lot, but they're struggling. Alexander closed the folder. Slowly, he sat in silence for a moment. Then he looked up and said, Let's help her. Quietly. No press. No credit. Mr. Harris nodded, smiling slightly. Of course, sir. The next week, the community center received an anonymous donation, enough to cover all their expenses for 2 years. A new art room was added, filled with fresh paints, brushes, and drawing supplies. They even installed a ramp and better equipment. For kids with special needs. And Lila, without knowing who was behind it, received a call from a top hospital. A group of doctors wanted to see her, free of charge. When she told Alexander about the call during one of his visits, her eyes were shining with hope. Isn't it amazing? She said, The world surprises us sometimes. Alexander smiled. Yes, it does. They sat outside the center that day, enjoying the fresh air. Children were playing nearby, drawing with chalk on the pavement. "Do you believe in miracles?" Lila asked suddenly. Alexander looked at her. "I didn't, but maybe I'm starting to." She grinned. "Me too." As the days passed, they grew closer. Alexander started coming by the center almost every day. Sometimes he helped with story time. Sometimes he just sat and listened. The children adored him, even though they didn't know who he really was. To them, he wasn't a billionaire. He was just Mr. Alexander, the quiet man who always brought snacks and asked about their dreams. One day, Lila's aunt came to meet him. Her name was Martha. She was a kind woman, tired but full of love. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "You've been very kind to Lila." "I should be thanking her," Alexander replied. "She talks about you all the time." Martha smiled. "You've made her believe in herself again." Alexander felt a warmth in his chest. It was the kind of feeling he used to think only existed in Bookstadt. Later that week, the doctors gave Lila their full report. With proper therapy, there was real hope for her. Her condition could be slowed, maybe even improved. She would need regular treatments, support, and care, but the road ahead was no longer dark. When Alexander heard the news, he stepped outside. Alone. He looked up at the sky and closed his eyes. She might get to live a long life. That thought made tears come again, but this time they were happy tears. Back at the center, Lila was drawing again. When he returned, she handed him another sketch. This one showed a large hand reaching down to help a smaller hand up. Above it, she had written, "Sometimes heroes don't wear capes. They just show up." He looked at her. "Is that me again?" "Maybe," she said with a twinkle in her eye. That evening, Alexander went home and sat at his desk. He opened an old notebook, one he hadn't used in years. And for the first time in a long time, he began to write. Not a business plan, not a contract. A poem. It began with, "She sat by the window. In silence she drew a world full of hope, in colors so true." He didn't know if he'd ever share it with anyone, but writing it made him feel alive. The man who had once chased only money had found something better: connection, purpose, and maybe even love in its purest form. And it all began with a girl in a wheelchair, a smile that never faded, and words that healed more than she could ever know. Days turned into weeks, and Alexander's visits to the community center became part of his daily routine. The walls of his luxury office felt less important than the colorful drawings and laughter he now heard every afternoon. But even as Alexander grew closer to Lila and the other children, he kept one thing private: his true identity. To the kids, he was just a kind man who cared, nothing more. Lila's health was improving slowly but surely. She went to the hospital regularly for treatments and came back to the center full of new energy. Her drawings became even more beautiful, filled with hope, love, and dreams of a brighter future. Alexander often told her she was the bravest person he had ever met, but she always smiled and said, "I'm just like everyone else." One afternoon, a special event was planned at the community center. They wanted to show the city how much good was being done in this small corner of the world. The event was a small art exhibition featuring the children's work. The center had no money to pay for big advertisements, but word spread quickly. Alexander decided it was time to be honest. He invited Lila and a few of the center's leaders to a quiet restaurant downtown. The restaurant was not the usual fancy place he went to. It was simple, warm, and full of small details that made people feel at home. Lila's eyes widened as Alexander looked at her seriously. "Lila," he said gently, "there is something I want to tell you." She nodded, curious but calm. "My real name is Alexander Reed," he said. "I'm the owner of several companies. You might have heard of me." Lila blinked in surprise, but didn't say anything. I wanted to keep it a secret because I didn't want you to treat me differently, he continued. But I realize now, honesty is better. I care about you and this community more than anything I've ever cared about before. Leela smiled softly. It doesn't change anything for me. You are still the same kind man who helped me believe in myself. That moment felt like a new beginning for both of them. The day of the art exhibition arrived. The small community center was filled with paintings, sketches, and sculptures made by the children. People from the neighborhood, nearby businesses, and even some journalists came to see the show. Alexander quietly watched as Lila welcomed guests, her smile bright and proud. She talked about her dreams, her struggles, and how art gave her hope. The visitors listened, moved by her courage. Suddenly, a woman from the city council approached Alexander. She introduced herself as Mrs. Johnson, a leader who worked on projects to improve the city's poor neighborhoods. I've heard about your generous donations, she said, but it's more than money that's needed. We want to help you. Build something bigger here, a safe place for all children, with better facilities, schools, and health services. Alexander nodded thoughtfully. This was an opportunity to make a real difference, not just for Lila, but for many others like her. He looked at Lila, who was busy showing her drawings to a group of children. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. I want to help build that place. Alexander said softly. The months that followed were full of work, hope, and challenges. Alexander used his influence to bring new supporters to the community center. More donations came in, and with Mrs. Johnson's help, plans were made to build a new center with better access for children with disabilities, a larger art studio, a small library, and rooms for therapy and learning. Lila was involved in every step. She gave ideas, shared her dreams, and inspired everyone around her. She believed that this new center could be a place where children learned not just skills but kindness and hope. One day, as construction began, Alexander visited the site with Lila. The land was empty, waiting for the building to rise. They stood together, watching the workers start to clear the ground. Layla looked up at Alexander. Do you think it will be ready by next year? She asked. Alexander smiled. With a little patience and a lot of work, yes. She nodded and then asked, something surprising. Will you teach me how to write poetry someday? He laughed. I'll teach you everything I know. That moment, simple but full of promise, felt like the start of a new chapter. Alexander realized that helping Lila and the community had given his life a meaning he never thought possible. Life wasn't always easy. One afternoon, Lila felt tired and weak. She told Alexander she didn't want to come to the center for a few days. Her disease was reminding her of its power. Alexander stayed by her side, holding her hand and promising that he would be there no matter what. Don't give up, Lila, he whispered. You're stronger than you know. She smiled faintly and squeezed his hand. I won't give up. Not when there's so much to look forward to. Alexander understood then that real strength wasn't just about money or power. It was about hope, love, and being there for someone when they needed it most. Months later, the new community center opened. It was more than just a building. It was a symbol of what people could achieve when they came together. Children laughed, painted, and played in ways they had never imagined. Families found support. Dreams grew bigger. At the opening ceremony, Alexander gave a speech. He spoke not about business or money, but about kindness, hope, and the power of believing in each other. After the opening of the new community center, everything began to change in the best way. Children from nearby neighborhoods now had a safe, colorful, and joyful place to play, learn, and dream. Every wall was decorated with art. Every classroom was filled with books, and every corner was full of laughter. Lila's drawing of the new center hung proudly in the entrance hall. Visitors stopped to admire it every day. Underneath the drawing, a simple plaque read, built by kindness, guided by hope. Lila, now stronger and more confident, had become a symbol of inspiration. Though she still used her wheelchair, her spirit was stronger than ever. The treatments she had been receiving continued to help her improve, slowly but surely. She had more energy, fewer bad days, and more reasons to smile. Alexander came by often more than ever, but he no longer came just as a helper or donor. He came as a friend, a mentor, and part of the family. His world, once filled with meetings and silent offices, now echoed with children's laughter, music from the art room, and the rustling of paper as Lila and the others drew new dreams. One sunny afternoon, Lila and Alexander sat under the shade of a big tree near the center. A gentle breeze moved through the leaves, and birds chirped above them. "I've been thinking," Lila said, looking up at the sky. "I want to write a book someday, about everything. About my life, this place, and you." Alexander looked at her with gentle surprise. "About me?" she nodded. "You came into my life like a quiet light. I want people to know that even someone who seems far away from our world can still have a big heart." Alexander smiled softly. "And I want to write something too." Lila turned to him, curious. "I started writing again," he continued. "Poems, small stories. You helped me find my words again." Lila grinned. "Maybe we can write something together." "That's a promise," he said, and they shook hands. Over time, the story of the new center began to spread across the city. Newspapers wrote about it, people shared photos online, and families came from other parts of town just to visit. Still, Alexander always asked to keep his name out of the spotlight. He wanted the focus to be on the children, on Lila, and on the idea that love and kindness could build something beautiful. One evening, a special surprise was planned. The children and staff of the center decided to organize a small event in honor of Lila and Alexander. It wasn't a big celebration, just a heartfelt gathering filled with songs, poems, and stories. Lila was seated at the front with a small crown of handmade paper flowers on her head. Alexander sat beside her, humbled and quiet. The children performed a small play based on their story, the meeting between a busy man and a brave girl who changed each other's lives. When the play ended, Lila was asked to speak. She wheeled herself to the front, took the microphone, and looked around at all the smiling faces. "There was a time," she began, "when I thought the world was too big and I was too small. I thought no one saw me, that I didn't matter. But then someone did see me. He listened. He didn't try to fix everything. He just cared." Her voice softened. "We all have something to give. A smile, a kind word, a hand to hold. And when we give, we grow. This place, this beautiful place, was built with kindness. And I want everyone here to remember, you don't have to be rich or famous to make someone's life better. You just have to care." The room was silent for a moment, and it filled with warm applause. Alexander felt a tear slip down his cheek, not because he was sad, but because his heart had never felt so full. That night, after the event, he walked Lila home under the stars. "Do you ever think about the first time we met?" she asked. "All the time," he replied. "You changed everything for me." She smiled. "You changed everything for me too." As time went on, more wonderful things began to happen. The community center opened after-school programs, free, health checkups, and even small scholarships for children who wanted to study further. People who once walked past without noticing now stopped to volunteer, donate, or just say thank you. Layla's health continued to improve. Though her legs remained weak, her spirit never wavered. She was now writing a children's book based on her life, filled with drawings, poems, and little messages of hope. Alexander, meanwhile, slowly started stepping back from his businesses. He handed over many of his responsibilities to trusted team members. He didn't disappear from the business world, but now he spent more time where his heart truly belonged, at the center, with Lila, and with the people who had shown him the real meaning of wealth. One special morning, Alexander surprised Leila with something she never expected. He handed her a book. On the cover, it read, "You Changed Me," by Alexander Reed. Inside were poems, short reflections, and drawings he had made with her. The dedication page said, "For Lila, the girl who showed me how to see the world again." She opened it. Slowly, her eyes wide. "You published this?" she asked. He nodded. "I wanted the world to know our story, not just mine." Tears welled up in her eyes as she hugged the book tightly. "It's beautiful." So was the journey they had taken together. Years passed, but the bond between Alexander and Lila only grew stronger. The center continued to thrive. Lila became a well-known speaker for children with disabilities, inspiring schools, hospitals, and even leaders with her words. Alexander, often standing quietly in the background, watched with pride. One day, while walking through the garden near the center, Lila looked up at Alexander and said, "Do you think people like us are meant to meet, even from such different worlds?" He thought for a moment, then smiled. "I don't believe in accidents anymore. I believe in purpose. And I believe some meetings are written in the stars." She nodded, looking up at the sky. In the end, their story wasn't about money, or power, or fame. It was about two hearts finding each other in the most unexpected place. It was about kindness shared, hope restored, and lives changed forever by one simple choice: to care. And sometimes that's all it takes to make the unbelievable happen.